Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ion Canon podcast, your home for in-depth conversation on the High Republic, the whole canon. And I just missed that up entirely. We're your home for in-depth discussion on lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. I've been doing this for 3 years. How do I miss that one? Anyway, my name is Matthew. I'm coming to you, as always, from Underworld North Studio in Toronto, and I'm joined by across the continent by your friend and mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing pretty good. I got a little bit of glare. Hopefully that will go away. I closed the blinds
Yeah.
perfectly, but sometimes the window doesn't always work out. But overall, pretty good. It's finally starting to get warm here, so that's nice.
You look fine as always. You're good. There we go. I blame the lack of my decaf. I haven't had enough decaf tonight. There we go. That's the problem. But too late for what? The Republic to fall? It already has, and you just can't see it. There's no justice, no order, but the one that will replace it. Now, formally, the Galactic Empire began with Palpatine's declaration in the Senate and the reorganization he promised. But Maul's biting words to Ahsoka in the Sundari throne room point to a deeper truth that the Republic and the CAS had already given way to one single authoritarian regime. And this week, we look at the rise of the Empire, what it looked like, and when it happened. Diving right in, but first we'll get to some of the plugs out of the way. You can follow us primarily on Blue Sky at Ion Canon, also Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Ion Canon Pod. That's EYEONCANONPOD. Also, if audio is warrior speed, you can check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Whenever we're done recording tonight, going live tonight, I will pop this up onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts for your listening pleasure. Moving right along, we are proudly part of the Star Wars Underworld podcast network, and here on the Underworld YouTube channel, we got memberships, we got super chats. If you do comment in the comment below, we'll get to it when we can, as soon as possible. If you super chat us, we'll be grateful for any support and help you can provide to the channel and to the network. That I will interrupt myself mid word if possible, and get to that super chat. We're grateful for any support you can provide to the channel and to the network. Also, the Star Wars Underworld Discord server, Minty Fresh link down below in the comments, in the description rather. Please do check that out. We got conversations all about Andor, spoiler conversations about Andor, also probably non-spoiler conversations about Andor, about Star Wars books and comics and other news, other things happening, Marvel, etc., Star Trek, etc. Food. I think you posted something about lunch the other day. I got game nights and movie nights, and I think something's coming up this Friday. Is that correct?
Yes, this Friday we will be watching the one, the only Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Join us Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern, and be there as we prep for Andor Season 2.
I was going to say, I feel like that film is relevant to a show that's coming out in a few weeks.
You think so?
You
think so?
2 weeks time. Yeah, there we go. Two more things to get to. Plugs. Tractor Beam Comics reviews. Usually every Wednesday, Chris Abbott and I talk about the comic books that came out that week, that day. Chris, of course, I think he's on the plane to Japan right now as we speak. So he'll be traipsing around Japan on Wednesday, and I think there's only one comic book coming out. Anyways, I believe Jedi Knight's #2. So I mean, there's an Edge of Balance Premonition coming out tomorrow. But we're gonna take a break. We'll deal with those books later on when Chris is back and safe and sound back in America. So we'll take a break this coming Wednesday, but stand by next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, right here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel. We're gonna switch places, Joel. Let's see what this looks like. See if we can do that. This is how it's gonna look. Get used to it.
It's too much.
Don't get used to it. In a week and a half, we were talking about Legacy of Vader number 3 that we're on now. Legacy of Vader number 3, I believe. So looking forward to that conversation. Such a fantastic comic book.
Kylo versus Gardula the Hutt. Let's go.
There we go. It's always Charles Soule kicking up a fuss. Anyways, so yeah, that'll go next Wednesday. 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, right here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, and then on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Search Tractor Beam Comics Reviews for that. Last but not least, if you are on your way to Japan, if you are going to Japan, this for a certain little Pacific Coast party in the next coming up, also in the next few weeks, in a week and a half. It's 2 weeks, in 2 weeks from now, just under 2 weeks from now. Our friend Ash, friend of the show, friend in real life, friend in person, Ash is doing her panel. Senator Rebel Chancellor, who is Mon Mothma, of course, the world's biggest Mon Mothma fan. So you definitely want to check that out if you can. That's Friday, April 18th from 4 to 5 p.m. at the fan stage. It's 4 to 5 local time in Japan on the fan stage. And then when that goes up on YouTube, we will be sure to let you know. Speaking of which, call an audible, one last plug over on the Culture Slate YouTube channel. I am back on the Culture Slate YouTube channel. It's been a while. It's been a bit. But yeah, I'm there. Ash and I are on there. Our panel from Toronto Comic Con, all about Taylor Swift, on screen. That is up right now. When we're done, if you're bored by Star Wars comics and Star Wars news and conversation, that's fine. If you're more interested in Taylor Swift, you can go over there, but we'd rather wait till we're done and then go check out our panel from Toronto Comic Con. It was a great panel. I know I'm tooting my own horn here, but I think we did a great job going through and Taylor Swift's film and TV roles, her music videos, and special performance by Din of F1. So check that out. All right. I believe we're through the plugs, all the way through the plugs. I've gabbed a bit. What's up this week, Joel?
This week in Star Wars is going to be a little different, where I am going to do a bit of a Eye on Canon mail-in. That's right, because we got comments last week. Woo! And I say that with love. We actually did get some great comments from my good friend and yours, Mr. Red Leader Antilles. Keep that very good comments. I can't read them all because unfortunately we have time limit. Yes. So if you want to go back to that old episode and read the comments yourself, fellas.
Last week's episode, right?
Yes, this last week's episode, Road to Rebellion. The light side version of this episode. He commented a couple of things we brought up, such as Saw Gerrera's death and what he was going through his head. Without further ado, I'll see what he says. The comic adaptation, he says what he says. The comic adaptation shows us what Saw is thinking. His final words.
Sorry. The comic adaptation of Rogue One?
Yes, the comic of Rogue One shows us what Saw is thinking. His final words are Steela, which honestly, I am not the biggest fan of. Hang on. He think, and this is, I think, what Red's interpretation of the movie is. He is thinking about his daughter, who's Jin. I don't think he now trusts Mon. He never just stopped supporting the rebellion. He no longer takes orders from Mothma, but he clearly, as men in regular communication with Draven's network. Has men in regular communication with Draven's network. The alliance is not just Mon and Radis, etc. It is also those assets, and he is trusting those to do something. However, more than anything, I think he's trusting Jin. He remarks on how fitting it is that today, 4 days, they sent Jin. If Jin is there, if his old friend Galen is the one with the plan, and who is supposed to be rescued, then he has hope. I don't think he changed his mind so much as he sees Jin cannot be kept out of the fight any longer. He chose not to go back for her, and now her presence in the war cannot be avoided. Like the world literally dies, and he stands there watching his daughter carry on the fight. I think people underestimate how important Jin is to Saw. I'll go into the next part, which I wanted to read. But any thoughts on that, Matthew?
Yeah, he's right. Like, we don't consider Jin being so tied to Steela specifically, and
don't you mean Saw?
Yeah, for Saw, in Saw's heart, in his mind, but in his heart, in his self. Just struck by that, and how Jin maybe represents. Well, maybe part of the reason he leaves her behind is because he lost Steela and he doesn't want to go through that again.
Yeah,
and so now he's now Jin going off and joining the fight represents almost Steela's resurrection for Saw, in that, because Steela, she went down fighting the Separatists, fighting what he perceived as the enemies of Onderon, at least. And now Jin is going off to fight the Empire. Uh, yeah, and so I mean, and just the father daughter dynamic. I mean, she had just seen the hologram of Galen for the first time, seen her father for the first her birth father for the first time in decades, since she was a kid, and of course running into Saw for the first time in just what 3-4 years. It's still a while.
Probably a
Well,
lot. Is it? Would it be?
maybe
I think she was like a teenager, so yeah, probably like 3, 4,
yeah,
5.
around there, whatever. Still quite a bit of time, but yeah, there's Star Wars taps into that theme of standing on the shoulders of the generation before, and so and of the theme of well, we are what they grow beyond. That like old Ben Kenobi, like Qui-Gon, like Loading Greatstorm, like interesting to see now, like Saw Gerrera letting go. He can now let go because the dream will live on in Jin.
Well, it's funny that she dies. Although I guess she dies to get to Luke. So
Yeah, true.
but the dream still lives on. So good,
Mhm.
good on him. Good on
And
him.
he didn't know that. He didn't know that she was gonna die. So
I mean, that's
yeah.
true.
Mhm.
This is a good reminder, everybody. Read Rebel Rising if you want to know more about the Jin Saw relationship. So the next part I just wanted to bring up is his thing about Mon Mothma. We asked like why did Mon Mothma kind of become the official leader of the rebellion? He says, I think part of why things coalesced around Mon is because she already had institutional power. People had little choice but to join the alliance, and the alliance inevitably became dominated by those with the most power already. There is a reason why the Mon Calamari became so important, though they joined up later. They had the ships, they had the prosperity, while the Mimbanese, though they're in Solo, who saw nothing but oppression, could not exactly coerce or convince people to follow them. It's part of the difference between Yavin Group, which are the people we see in A New Hope,
Yeah.
and the Partisans / Cloud Riders. Cloud Riders from Solo are a bunch of former slaves and people who went through genocide. The Partisans are ideologically opposed to the Empire pretty much from day one, have no choice but to fight. They don't come together from intact organizations or entirely planetary fleets. They are disposed. They are disposed.
Dispossessed, I think.
Dispossessed. My bad.
Yeah.
Mon also is intentionally enough of a blank slate that people can project what they want onto her. Like she says in Andor, this goes for her radical or polite anti-Palpatine allies as well. They can see what they want to see, and she will delegate enough that she is not taking a firm stand on eternal policy matters. So what do you think about this comment?
Yeah, and also it makes sense. I think I don't know if I want to do too strong of a point between like it's not like the wealthier factions groups within the alliance were excluding the others. It's just that maybe I mean they were from I mean the Mon Calamari, they're familiar with their systems. Maybe there is a bit to say, a bit of a question to say, did they kind of this almost this anti-capitalist question of did they just presume it because they had the money? I do think with Alderaan, for example, they didn't
And the
call
money
the shots.
helped. I'm sure
The money, yeah, well, they definitely funded it, but I mean, maybe that's why Leia was so important as well. I mean, there's also privilege gives you education, trains you for that kind of career. Like we said, last week she could have joined she could have replaced Masamida if she wanted to. She could have replaced Tarkin or whoever if she wanted to. Instead, she chose another path. Whereas, that's an interesting point. That she had the privilege to choose that, whereas the Cloud Riders and the Partisans didn't. So, yeah, it's again the. I mean, this is another reason why I want the New Republic story, because now that the Empire's out of the way, those tensions can resurface, and now those are interesting stories. They somewhat resurface in Bloodline, the a little bit, but it's Mon Mothma or I guess Mon Mothma's on it, but it's Leia becoming the heir to Mon Mothma, effectively. Sorry, slowly work decaf. Uh, who represents the populists, which maybe, I mean, you could argue that's about planetary control, whereas the centrists could be about redistribution for the common good. That's kind of what I wondered about that. But obviously, that's not what Claricinian cares about. So, uh, yeah, it's about. I mean, maybe Ransom Casterfo does care about that a little bit. The kind of central organization. So, yeah, it's a good point. I mean, either way, even those characters still have all that privilege. Again, I do wonder. I do want to see these things, see how the New Republic deals with those tensions, because that's when, I mean, yeah, like things coalesce get Ramon, in part because she had the power, also because Crisis will do that. Crisis will say, okay, let's just set aside our differences here and figure it out. And that's why Saw ends up on the outside of all that, because he's the one who doesn't do that. Whereas other more radical groups are able to do that and say, okay, for now. But yeah, I mean, again, I think of shoot. I'm blanking on her name because the character's gone, the actor's gone. The radical rebel in Mandalorian that we saw.
Cara Dune.
Yeah, Cara Dune. I mean, Leia ultimately with the Resistance, right? She breaks away, but she also can because she has the resources to do that. But yeah, I wonder. Yeah, I do want to see how does the New Republic handle these class tensions that that the rebellion just didn't have time for.
Indeed. There's some good real world stuff, which I don't want to get into. I would get into, but I don't think we have time. I'll leave the last paragraph because it's something you brought up about World War II. To Matthew's point about why people fight like in World War II, there is a reason more Americans defected during the Korean War than Vietnam. The flat-out ideology rejection of the war was more stark than those who just liberated Asia from Japan, only to be told literally put Japanese collaborators into position of power and to massacre the people that they just told to be free 5 years ago. Same with some of the French military during Algeria and Vietnam. They bought the bill, they were sold more so than those drafted for Vietnam, and some of them continued to fight for that ideal even when their country made it clear it didn't care. So yeah, that's just important. People fight for things they believe in, and I think a lot of, in World War II, people believed in it, and then Vietnam and Korea, it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And we talked about why if rebel people fight for what they believe in, and I guess 9 times out of 10, probably yes.
Yeah, and Watergate couldn't have helped.
Oh no, or just the news probably couldn't have helped. Period. But yeah. Those were the comments. I don't know if you had time, Matthew, to read any of the other ones. If anything stuck out.
There was one about Naboo.
Oh, I can read that one.
I forgot that. Yeah,
I'll read that one for you. I think this is from Red. I think an underrated setup for the Alliance is the Battle of Naboo. I don't know what we were talking about when we brought Naboo. Like Episode 1 comes out, the Naboo are parallel to the Rebels. You can see it especially in how factions work in the Galactic Battlegrounds. That's an old video game from the early 2000s. Good stuff. Naboo's military sort of feels like a shiny version of the Rebels, and of course they do rebellion/uprisings themselves against the Trade Federation. The PT moves away from that, but initially the Republic of Episode 1 is very limited in its visual symmetry with the Empire. In fact, by that point, it was not completely established that the Republic became the Empire directly. That was certainly the vibe then, but there was still some openness. What I'm saying is, Joel and I are right that C.O. Bibble should have been in Rogue One, and it's a travesty he wasn't. There was a rumor back in the day that C.O. Bibble was going to be in Rogue One, and I wish that was true. Because that would have been great.
Fantastic. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good point. And also, that's a good point about Episode 1, because because when Legends was coming out, and they always had their little allusions to the prequels and the Clone Wars, the whole Empire to Republic thing was never... always a little vague and weird, and it's like sometimes it acted as if the Republic and Empire actually fought it out with each other, like we're two separate things. And it was never quite sure. It was not like that direct Empire to Rebellion, like Empire to Republic to Empire, like we're talking about now. And that almost like you could argue like there was a split and rebellion, which is the remnants of the Republic, and it was very strange. But
Interesting.
that's what he was bringing up. Any comments on that? On that?
Where's that from? Because I mean, I've
Old
always
90s Star Wars books.
okay, because I mean, in George's mind, I'm guessing it was pretty clear. But as he set out to write the Phantom Menace, the Phantom Menace, how does he set to plot out the prequel trilogy?
Mhm.
I'm guessing it was pretty clear. Yeah, this is the Republic's going to become the Empire. This guy Sheev becomes the Chancellor. I know. Yeah. So I'm curious. Well, that's a good question. I mean, do we know? Do we know when George decided the Republic would become the Empire?
I mean, I do hope novelization pretty much says, yeah, Palpatine became president, then to make corporation
Yeah.
declared. It's more outside things. There's
Okay.
a good video
Yeah.
Corey Datapad does about the uh prequels timeline, how that all
Mhm.
meshed up.
Yeah.
Which I can send you later. But yeah, there's the
Yeah.
novelization definitely more direct in that way. It's just some other old school legend stuff like some like Crystal Star or
Okay.
Jedi Academy trilogy or even the X-wing books
Okay.
go into some of that. Fred, if you're in the comments later, feel free to tell us like where they say which books say like the Republic and Empire aren't as directly connected
Yeah.
as George eventually made them, because I'd love to go into that. That'd be cool.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought. I mean, again, I it seems pretty clear in George's mind, at least again, by the late 90s when he sat down to write and plot out the Phantom Menace. Yeah, this is going to become the Empire. I mean, because this parallel, we all know that this 9-year-old kid is going to become Darth Vader. This parallel story. So
Mhm.
yeah, I could do that. Interesting. Even the way he seeds in. I mean, to Red's point about the Naboo
Mhm.
being like the rebellion.
Mhm.
I mean, it's almost like the whole thing. It's like poetry, right? Right.
Yeah.
That whole thing. I mean, you have like in Return of the Jedi, you have uh the air battle or
Mhm.
the space battle. They're flying to a sphere that
Yep.
Ash and I talked about, the Death Star coming from the Lucre Hulks. Also, they fly to a sphere in A New Hope, but in Phantom Menace, they're flying to a sphere, and they're doing the ground battle with this indigenous species, and there's the lightsaber duel with the Sith. you know, um, it, it's it's like poetry, right?
Yeah. Actually, you know what? It's a short comment, and I think it's really good because it mentions Lando. So I'm gonna just
Okay,
bring this up.
great.
Okay, so we talk about the Lando thing. The point
Mhm.
about the judiciary reminds
Oh
me
yeah,
of Michael Parentini's part of the legitimation of the nature. It's the video. Part of the legitimization and official nature of Mon is
Mhm.
also about wielding state power and at
Right.
times taking rights away. The existence of a trial for Lando means the rebellion gives itself the ability to suppress certain rights at certain times,
Right.
something that, for all the brutality, I'm sure Saw would view as hypocritical. A state comes with an inherent and necessary monopoly of violence. I think what he's trying to get at is one of the big things about the rebellion is the rebellion
Mhm.
was already trying to build up a future state for itself
Yeah.
even before it destroyed the emperor. So
Mhm.
it was like Mom was building government before she was officially a government.
Yeah. Um, and we see. I mean, everyone called her the Chancellor,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Yeah. There's this judiciary. I mean, it's got to be something Charles Soule thought of, right? So okay, we're gonna have Lando on trial. They actually have to figure out, okay, what code of justice do they use here. They picked like the Corellian code of justice because apparently it's the most fair. Obviously,
Good old
his
Corellian.
lawyer they get a lawyer. She gets him out of it by, spoiler alert, by saving Mom Mothma. It's how they get to drop the charges. So
That'll help. Yeah.
come full circle there. This is of course during the Hansicle, at the end of the Hansicle there, and
Mhm.
Charles Soule's ongoing comic. But I want more legal drama in Star Wars too. But yeah, it's true. I mean, that's the thing. The Westphalian state having the monopoly of power. I mean, that's the Weber
Mhm.
definition, I think. Um, Yeah, I mean, again, this is an interesting question because the pacifist in me, the the pluralist in me, um, even though I'm a social democrat, I'm also a pluralist in terms of you know a society, a state isn't coterminous with society. There's also other institutions, mediating institutions, and you know, yeah, the ability to impose force and have a monopoly on force, on violence, doesn't mean that they're going to use or they should use it. And maybe that uh, the slide into authoritarianism, repression, is an increased willingness, in part increased willingness to use that force. But there's obviously, like we talked about with in our election episode, right?
Yeah.
All these other institutions need to be robust and healthy and have vibrant conversation and input. I'm talking about just democratic rights, but also, but that's something about rights, right? The rights, right? Rights need to be uh, encouraged. They need to be positive rights, in that the the population needs to be encouraged to make use of them and not discouraged from making use of them. Interestingly, in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s in Canada, there was, in an effort to, in partly in to ensure French language rights, to appease Quebec
Mhm.
was a big part of this, but to ensure the vibrancy of French language rights, there was a program where a an aggrieved party could apply for government funding for their Supreme Court challenge, for for a charter rights and freedoms um, case. I don't know if necessarily Supreme Court all the way. Well, I mean, it did. I mean, there were cases that, so basically, rights claims, human rights claims,
Mhm.
the legal process funded by the federal government. Stephen Harper acts that, unfortunately, but it was just a fascinating example of, yeah, other institutions, other rights. And it was used not just for language rights, but it was used for all sorts of things. I think that maybe uh, I'm not sure what else, some other examples, but um, I think some things about same sex marriage and abortion and other issues, other those contentious issues, uh, were those cases, I think, had court challenges program funding. Don't quote me on that, although I'm on the internet saying this. I could be wrong about that. I'll disclaimer, I could be wrong about that, but yeah,
We
it's
could be
it's
wrong, people. We're on the internet, but we could be wrong.
but it, to the point of, a healthy republic, the galactic republic. Canada's not a republic. A healthy galactic republic is one that doesn't just have a monopoly of violence. It's one that also uh, seeks to encourage the well-being of its citizens. That's the idea, and that's this great divide I think we have in our society about the whole purpose of government at all. Right? Some people think government only exists to make me wealthy, or it doesn't matter at all, or just shouldn't exist at all. Basic services, um, or those could be privatized too. Why not? Why not privatize healthcare? Seems to be working out, right? uh,
Whoa.
-3 cheers for private healthcare. Um, but yeah, again, I know that it's a bit of a tangent on the whole monopoly of violence thing, but yeah, I find it. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. It's true. Sorry to bring it
No,
back to the point here, but yeah, yeah,
I'm
that
sure we'll do an episode
having a
about statecraft and Star Wars eventually.
yeah, we should. I mean, we kind of are today, a little
That's
bit,
true.
but speaking of monopoly and violence, I mean, speaking of more and more willingness to use that monopoly in the galaxy. Yeah.
But yes, thank you, Red, for the comments. Always leave comments. We love reading comments. And
Mhm,
anybody out there listening, send us your comments. Send us your in-depth thoughts, and we
mhm.
might read them, especially if they're
Yes.
really good.
Mhm. There you go. Yeah, mine very quickly, because we've gone quite a bit here. I'm just I've actually started Into the Light by Claudia Gray, the latest young adult novel in the High Republic. I haven't finished Haunted Starlight, the audio drama, but the young reader audio drama by George Mann. But I started reading Into the Light by Claudia Gray. I'm up to chapter 13. It's reminding me that she is the master of engaging prose. She's a master of setup and payoff. I just know. I mean, obviously, I'm only maybe less. I'm less than half of the way through, but it. I just know that this is really going to come together. It's always starting to come together as a story. So, looking forward to what my guy Reith ends up doing. But some other characters involved where their allegiances shift or not. Um, and where what Markian this guy ends up doing as well. But again, this is the first Claudia Gray novel, Star Wars novel since Fallen Star, I believe. So she's been away for a bit. Now she's back into the galaxy far, far away. I presume she was writing other things, as she should. But yeah, definitely enjoying it, reading it at a faster clip than I usually do, which is just saying something good. So definitely looking forward to keeping on going, keeping on. Hopefully my plan is to be done by the time Celebration comes around. Then maybe I'll go back to Haunted Starlight. Joel, I'm guessing you'll do. I don't know how far you're still around phase 2, but
Nah, I
do the
finished Tears of
audiobook.
the Nameless, and I'll
Okay.
start Into the Light when it comes out on audiobook.
Yeah, I don't understand why they delay it. It comes out April 15th on audio.
Thank heavens.
It makes no sense. Maybe because they figure people will take longer to read, and so they don't want spoilers, or who knows what. But maybe Audible just releases everything in the middle of the month.
Who knows?
I don't know.
It suck if they can't get Trial of the Jedi on the same day.
The adult novels they usually do, right?
Yeah, I got it. Mask of Fear the day of it released.
Yeah, so it's weird. Anyway, you're in for a treat. Chris is reading it on the plane. He'll have a slurry of texts for me, like when he lands, I'm sure. So, looking forward to continue on with High Republic. This is the last young adult novel in the High Republic, which is also mind blowing. There's the young reader Valiant Vow, and then of course Trials of the Jedi, and then the comics and the manga. There's 2 manga actually coming out this month, which is wild. One tomorrow and then one on the 22nd of all days. So definitely keep it locked here. Keep it locked on the Tractor Beam, where we will keep chatting about it all the way until June. And then we're going to have to change our slogan here, the discussion on the lore, the galaxy far, far away or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But High Republic off to quite a banging conclusion. It's careening. There's lots of story to tell still, though. That's the wild thing. Like Light of the Jedi, like this is all almost still set up for Light of the Jedi, right? Everything. Here's the Nameless, Echoes of Fear, Fear of the Jedi, all the Battle of Ariadu, all that. Get that out of the way for what Light of the Jedi ends up.
Don't you mean Trial of the Jedi?
Sorry, Trials of the Jedi. It's set up for Light of the Jedi because time travel. No, I'm just kidding. Time looping in itself. Although, I mean, the ending of Trials of the Jedi, it's going to be very similar to the ending of Light of the Jedi, right? Because they both revolve around this one little moment that changes everything. I'm guessing something about the Nameless and Planet X would be my guess. Right. Looking forward to. Speaking of master of setup and payoff, Mr. Charles Soule. I got that right. Set up then payoff. Mr. Charles Soule in Trials of the Jedi. Looking forward to that. But yes, Into the Light, up to chapter 13. Enjoyable so far. I don't know if you have any thoughts. Well, what are you looking forward to with Into the Light? And
reading a Claudia Gray book. I haven't read a Claudia Gray book in forever.
Yeah.
So
because you've done you did Fallen Star, right?
I don't know. I don't think I actually did. So I haven't read anything since ever the
and
last.
We're going to talk about what happens. I saw the notes. We're going to talk about what happens in it. But there we go. All right.
I know what happens in it, so it's not like I'm shocked.
Yes. There you go. All right. Let's quickly move right along. 2 more stories to get through, and then we can get to our main topic. I believe, promise. First off, do a bit of eyes on screen. Tales of the Underworld trailer dropped last week. It's pretty great. And this is the again continuing along with this. I think it's similar enough style, recognizable enough style to the Clone Wars. Just a continued evolution on season 7 of Clone Wars and then Bad Batch. That animation style looks spectacular. And yeah, as I said, it's featuring Cad Bane and Asajj Ventress. And this is the 3rd installment of the Tales series. Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, Chris and I talked about it on Wednesday. So Joel, I'll turn to you. What are your thoughts on Tales of the Underworld?
Yeah, very interesting. Like, kind of not on my bingo card. I always thought so now it just makes me wonder what the main series is gonna be.
Sure.
But outside of that, I mean, yeah, nice to see Ventress. I am on team. I'm glad Ventress is alive.
Yeah.
I think her story deserves quite much more, and I think she'll thrive in this dark times era. Cad Bane's backstory is also not on my bingo card. I am surprised we're gonna give this guy a little bit of depth to him and like where he comes from and why he is the way he is.
Mhm.
He was always such just I'm the evil bounty hunter. I shoot.
Mhm.
Like I'm ruthless and I don't care. Um, and it's interesting. Like now we're gonna this story could have like actually flesh him out a little bit and like see like, oh, he had a family and a friend, a brother. I don't know what he's supposed to be. So clearly
Mhm.
something close to him, and kind of see why he chose the path of the ruthless bounty hunter, whereas Saj Ventress seems to be wanting to get out of that life as well because she doesn't want to be
Sure.
Dooku's assassin or bounty hunter, and she's trying to find herself in her revived world. Both literally.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to these. I've been enjoying Tales. They're so well animated. They're very like Clone War, but just so well polished.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm excited for this. And now I just wonder what the heck the main series is going to be. Then
Yeah.
I thought an Underworld Asajj Venture thing was going to be the main series, so I guess I'm wrong. So what's that going to be like? But yeah, I'm excited. And I'm surprised it's this year. I thought it
Mhm.
would be next year because I always thought we would switch out Visions and Tails. But I guess not. So we're
Yeah.
gonna have a Tails and a Visions this year. So that's exciting for
A
animation
visionary,
fans.
hopefully a visionary tale. There we go.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, excited.
Yeah. Definitely excited for Ventress. You're right. Her story always deserves to continue. She's such a compelling character, including everything Katie Lucas wrote for her in the Dark Disciple arc, right?
Mm.
Uh, those arcs. It was 3 different arcs, I think. But yeah, and so I'm glad she's continuing. Even her appearance in Bad Batch, I didn't mind it. I think, and they even nodded towards uh, why how she survived and all that. Again, fascinating to see what she does in the dark times because I'm always curious to see, okay, a Jedi who's come from the Order, from that discipline, from the light side, now in this age of darkness, the dark times, to see, okay, what they do, what they hold on to. Ventress is coming from the other direction. She's saying, okay, now I've returned to the light. What am I going to discover? Am I going to fall back into my old habits? I don't think she will. I mean, she's pretty clearly rejected that, and even in the trailer. But where does she go? What does she end up doing?
Mm.
Does she help the rebellion, or is she kind of more like a Dr. Afra, Charlie Afra thing, where she's kind of iffy? um,
She
or
seems
I
to be
guess,
helping this kid, this
yeah, helping
Padawan.
this kid. Yeah, what's going on with this blue lightsaber? Who's that kid? I've heard some theories, but yeah, very very fascinating. I'm almost wondering. I think Chris mentioned this too. Is that is she? Are we going to do time jumps with her, or are they just going to tell one continuous 45-minute story for her, which could be good? I also wonder. I mean, here's another wild card: is what if this is a backdoor pilot? Not quite a backdoor pilot because it'll have aired. It'll air after Celebration. There's on May the 4th. Drops on May the 4th, rather. Uh, if it still is Adventures Underworld series or something else, we'll see. So that
Line up.
Yeah.
Let me line up.
One thing, two things. One thing, I'm a little worried with the Cad Bane series. I know they're going to handle it well. I know Filoni's going to handle it well. Does it take away from some of the mystique around him? This air of mystery. Always looking at the backstory always takes away some air of mystery. I mean, it did for Darth Vader, and look how that turned out. So, I mean, we'll get to that in a minute, but that turned out perfect. So I love it. So maybe it'll be fine. Maybe it'll be really interesting, gripping. Here's the question: we're taking poll. Here's a poll that we should actually have a poll.
Do we have
So,
polls? Is that like an actual thing we can do?
I don't know about on StreamYard, but on YouTube, but whatever. But we can do it on Twitter and other socials. But Joel, I'm asking you: do you think we're getting the Boba Fett showdown?
No, because they would have advertised the heck out of it.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. That's a take. I think they kind of did a bit of a fake out by having that other Duros' friend be the same color as Boba Fett's armor. And there's the showdown with that. So yeah, that's a thought. I don't know. I kind of think they will. I think this is a good place to put it. I know Dom mentioned that in his Substack. It's a good place to put it. So yeah, I agree. I get your point for sure. The kind of
I'll
thing
ask you this question.
Yeah.
Will we see Asajj Ventress wake up in the pool of life on Dathomir? Like, well, what happened? I thought I was dead.
Yeah.
Alive.
To actually show us
her first
resurrection,
seconds of new life.
Here's actually, so this is again what Chris and I brought up. Is she gonna maybe join the path and help with the path? Because I mean that's getting Jedi to escape, right, from Order 66 and whatnot.
I can see
is she gonna link up with her lover boy with speaking of Dark Disciple, speaking of again blanking on his name,
Quinlan Voss.
Yeah, that guy. I think that seems kind of likely. I mean, Obi-Wan name drops him in Kenobi.
Possible. Yeah. They've been teasing that forever. Maybe. I mean, if I could see the Ventress thing being a bit of a backdoor pilot, because I was looking at the trailer, and I'll move on quickly. I know we're running out of time. We see regular Imperial Stormtrooper armor alongside the beta Bad Batch version of Stormtrooper armor.
Right.
So, if my calculations are correct, at least one of these episodes takes place after the events of Bad Batch.
Yes, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. Fun times. All right, I'm just trying to cue things up here. All right, one last story. We talked about this last week. I'm going to talk about it again. Goat Party, Legends Edition, Revenge of the Sith at 20. I call it the Goat. Speaking of Vader's backstory, not losing any mystique, but becoming what I would say the greatest film of all time, my favorite film of all time, celebrating its 20th anniversary. And of course, part of that is the novelization that we talked about last week. Of course, the deluxe edition that comes out October 14th by Matthew Stover and George Lucas. This is very interesting. And so today, I believe it's just today, cover reveal. And oh my word, it's spectacular. I'm going to try and show this, see if I can. So that's not the half of it. That's just the half of it. Like, look at this. That's just the sleeve. So there's a sleeve that comes up. And there's the interior art. Even the thing on the sleeve there, on the sleeve, the pages. You can see my mouse there. Wow, it's cool. This is how it feels to be Anakin Skywalker forever. The gripping quote from this novelization, really specifically, kind of the way Matthew Stover framed the story, so brilliantly framed kind of Anakin's inner thoughts. I'm going to ignore that. Anyway, but yeah, you can see. So this is another big thing. So this is from Collider.com, by the way, their website here. So they got a bit of an exclusive, but then it was shared on socials. 150 annotations from Matthew Stover. I'm really curious about that. That's really fascinating. That puts it over the top for me. That makes it a must buy. It was really nice, and it's my favorite film of all time. But yeah, so
I'm gonna buy it just for the annotations alone.
Yeah, kind of reading this article here. I don't know if there's anything here. Yeah, good old Tom showing up here. But yeah, again, these annotations, and interestingly, Matthew Stover and George Lucas. I mean, I wonder what
I
that
don't think they changed the book. I think that's just because
like,
George wrote the script that
yeah,
he
mhm,
he based it off of. So it's like,
true.
I don't think it's like a rewrite of the book or anything
No,
like that.
yeah. So yeah, I'll get that off. But yeah, what do you think of this cover? What do you think of this news about the annotations?
Oh, the annotations are what's in it for me because I have heard things from forums I trust
Mm-hmm.
that Matthew Stover did have conversations with George Lucas, not just about the movie, but also about he was told some deeper thoughts of what George thought the past was like with the Sith and the
Mm-hmm.
backstory of the Sith and the Jedi that apparently he's under NDA on. And I wonder if the NDA is finally over and he can talk about those things now. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious just to see what Matthew Stover is allowed to say, what he was allowed to do and write in this
Mm-hmm.
book.
Yeah,
And then just get his inside thoughts.
yeah, fascinating. Looking forward to it for sure. It's October 14th. Makes me just want to go to New York Comic Con so I can just pick it up in a Barnes and Noble or something, or the Barnes and Noble booth at New York Comic Con. But no, I'll probably pre-order this myself. Cheaper than going to New York Comic Con at least. There we go. There we go. Because I'm going to San Diego Comic Con. So there we go. All right. I think that is it for the opening salvos. We're kind of finally ready for speaking of the events of Revenge of the Sith. Speaking of which, this is how Liberty dies with thunderous applause. Go ahead, take it away, Joel.
Yes, the road to empire. As we all know, as we said at the beginning of this episode, Palpatine declared the first Galactic Empire in the year 19 BBY. But did the empire truly form in 19 BBY? When do republics truly become empires? Maul thought, in the Revenge of the Sith novelization himself,
Mhm,
Palpatine said, "We have been an empire for a while. Let's just finally say that we're an empire in name." When did this
mhm,
happen? When did this transition begin? What is the historical context?
mhm,
All this and more on Ion Canon. I don't know why I wanted to say that, but I did. Um, okay, so let's ask the first question.
mhm,
Um, when does the empire officially begin? Obviously, I'm gonna use some fancy words. Okay, we know de jure official
mhm,
transition from republic to empire is 19 BBY. Most historiographers would officially say that.
mhm,
But when did it de facto begin? We
mhm,
have a few guesses.
mhm,
I always have two guesses. Some people, and I always think this is maybe what Attack of the Clones wants to infer.
mhm,
It begins with the formation of the clone army. I mean, that's the whole moment in Attack of the Clones at the end where you hear the Imperial March and the clones are marching off to war, and Bale does kind of this thing with his fists, like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Um, no,
mhm,
that's people. I think when people say that's when the Empire formed, especially because even in things like Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire,
mhm,
so many people equate the Republic militarization with
yeah,
Imperial formation. Yeah, that's fine.
right,
Um, there are other people, and I've seen a couple people on
mhm,
forums debate this. It officially begins with Palpatine being Chancellor. No, he was Chancellor for like 10 years before
mhm,
the Clone Wars even began. I mean, Anakin was like 1920 when Attack of the Clones were like that's good
yeah,
5-10 years from Anakin to go to that little boy on Tatooine. To a man. A man. Um,
mhm,
so some people might say, "Oh, that's when the official Empire begins when
yeah,
Palpatine becomes the Chancellor." I do wonder how. I do wonder from an in-universe perspective what the Imperial historiographers say about Palpatine's first 10 years
mm,
as chancellor. It reminds me a little bit of Napoleon of how he was first consul for at least a good 5 years, maybe more. I forget when he became first consul before
mm,
he officially became emperor, but people would still consider that part of the French Empire, Napoleonic epoch.
Hmm.
of that time period. Um, but or when people debate whether the Roman Empire
Yeah.
begins with Caesar Julius or Caesar Augustus. So yeah, those are
Mhm.
kind of our three kind of questions here. Our three kind of our thoughts here. So Matthew, I'll go with you.
Yeah.
De jure, we know it's 19 BBY. I don't think we're going to debate that.
Right.
What do you think de facto the empire forms?
Well, first off, I'll say, the question itself is important because, like I mentioned at the top with Maul's quote, it's already the Republic is already fallen. It's already an empire. I mean, the end of Attack of the Clones, it's definitely a poignant moment. It's the first time these white clad troops looking like that. I'll raise my thing.
Oh,
Looking like that.
okay.
No, I raised my mic so I can show you what a clone trooper looks like.
Oh, all right. Nice. Well, we got the Rex helmet in the behind you.
Yeah, but they don't look like Rex. They look like
That's
those
true.
guys.
The ones that
'Cause
killed the Jedi in the temple did. They were blue.
that's true. But these guys are supposed to look like precursors to Imperial stormtroopers. To my point about the Republic being the Empire, I mean, by
Right.
Attack of the Clones,
Right.
George was already there. Obviously, this is what we're talking about.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So I mean, that's the yeah. So there's a grand army of these white troopers taking over the galaxy, right? Not taking over, but spread throughout the galaxy, commanded by a central army, central force.
Mhm.
Um, the with these ships, with these pointy ships and all that. The design language of the Republic during the Clone Wars is pointing to this, right? And uh there's that aspect of it. But we're going to go into this a little later, but in a minute. But I think Maul is really referring to the center periphery relationship, because that's what an empire is. It's one in which the uh, the periphery is completely at the best of the center. And the thing with the galaxy, the Galactic Republic, is it's really the bright center of the galaxy. The core
Mhm.
is the wealthy, consolidated, or the I mean, it has consolidated all the economic power and all the political power. The the only important chancellors senators are from these planets. All the corporations, they're vying for vying for not just Republican, like, favorable legislation, but uh there's this relationship between the state and uh the corporations that, I mean, it just happens to go in a different direction with the separatists. But the fact that that's even possible shows how embed corporate interests, and corporate interests are always about consolidating power within themselves. And so, that's the thing about an empire. At least empires that we have nowadays. I mean, we were such afraid of the Red Scare, their evil empire. We didn't notice that uh, American corporate power was extending throughout the planet in the real world. Coruscant corporate power had extended throughout the galaxy by this point, which is partly why we talked about this last week. Why outlying star systems had a grievance, one that gets triggered by the taxation of outlying trade routes, right? How dare the Republic tax these? I mean, James Lucino, it's in Legends, but tax these plasma trade routes, uh, this energy that we need, you know, and poor Naboo, who cares? I mean, they should be aggrieved. They should join the separatists. Like, what are they doing? So, um, yeah, yeah, I it's hard to pinpoint a specific moment. This is kind of what I'm getting at here, and I think what the point of this episode is. It's hard to pinpoint a specific moment because democracy isn't taken; it's given away, and it's given away largely through. I mean, nowadays in our minds, in our imagination, it's given away largely through what we vote with our wallets and how we vote with our wallets. And I'm complicit in it. We're all complicit in it. But at least that's definitely during for the prequels. That's the point that George is making here. And so I don't know if I can really answer your question. Maybe we don't really have a clear story. I know, I'd like to see. I'm sure Beaumont Kin has a point to say it. I guess when, but yeah, that's why it's an open debate.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
I brought this
Mhm.
just in case.
Yeah.
This will go in great with our next point. Hang on,
Mhm.
let me find it. Well, obviously he doesn't. You can't go in too much because, unfortunately, we don't have the in between parts of High Republic and Phantom Menace outside of
Right.
Acolyte. We do have this. He talks a little about the Senate.
Mhm.
This is page 38. There has been a tendency, as already mentioned in this study, to idealize the Senate of the Republic, to view it at the time of its fall through the lens of its heightened moments. History of the admittedly long gone era, now collectively referred to as the High Republic, have noted how the state aimed to be a unifying force, and the slogans such as "We are all the Republic" and "For light and life" motivated both the ordinary citizen and the Jedi to move the galaxy forward. A few of these studies have overlooked some of the growing problems within the High Republic. Though idealism can be a powerful bond, the motives and directives of individual senators were a source of potential erosion.
Hmm.
Similarly, the government's response to the aggression from a pirate group known as the Nile was, initially at least, less than impressive, and significant civilian casualties were sustained from the situation before the situation was brought under control. However, what can be taken from this period of history is that the galaxy and its various institutions could still be rallied together against the emerging menace.
Hmm.
There remained a desire to try and improve the Republic and the galaxy, and the system of government allowed for those to be undertaken. However, the final 100 years of the Republic were a far cry from the ideals gone before. The Senate
Mhm.
that existed during the last year of the Republic had fallen a very long way from those lofty heights. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Just one more point. The
Mhm.
sad irony of the Republic's fall is that it came at a time when some of the most capable and idealistic politicians for a generation were present and attempting to prevent the unfolding collapse, a la Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and Padme. So there we go.
Mhm.
Thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah.
Rise and Fall, page 38.
Mhm. And again, I'm glad he brings up High Republic because you can put it where you want. uh, because that's the thing. I mean, I think that's what Team Luminous is trying to say, and it's clearly what Chris Kemshall is trying to say. Uh, Beaumontkin, whatever, is that I think we mentioned this before. That the idea of state building, and even with good intentions and really, I think, good results to some extent, with Lena So trying to bring everyone together and consolidate in a way that includes everyone. It's still consolidation, and it's still, I talk about pluralism, right? It's still coming under this unitary republic. I mean, not because there's still planets, but
I always
you
thought
know,
it was more of a federal republic, if you ask
yeah,
me.
it's a federal republic, but under the idea of sovereignty throughout the galaxy. And I mean, it does exist and it doesn't in phase two. What's interesting with phase two, we see a lot more of on Jeddah, and we see the Jedi being just one among many. And if the Jedi are one among many, it's kind of the Republic is one among many. Um, and that they can be genuinely threatened by the Nile. I guess there's still an assumption of some connection between the Outer Rim and the Republic, the rest of the Republic. But even something like Iram and Arano are sort of outside of the Republic's direct influence until uh, Chancellor Molo shows up. And is it Chancellor Molo? No, it's it. Yeah, and Starlight Beacon shows up to Irem to say to bolster that presence to say, okay, let's actually broker a peace as a way of saying, oh yeah, the government on Coruscant can be trusted to preserve the peace. And there's this really weird, almost creepy. I'm just thinking this now a little bit, but I've noticed this before. It's a bit of a visual cue in that. So Starlight Beacon. This is just I'm just kind of spitballing here. Starlight Beacon, the spire with the where the Jedi the Jedi outpost on Starlight Beacon is. That's of course modeled off of one of the towers at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant in the real world, you know that in Return of the Jedi, the spike on the Death Star where Palpatine's office is. I mean, that design gets taken and says, okay, that the Jedi Temple is going to look at this because, and I think maybe I don't know where in the real world development this is, but we know in universe, Palpatine takes over the Jedi Temple, and so there's
I
this
think that was
weird.
a George thing from Underworld that got transferred to canon.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know because, but in say in universe, there's this weird linkage between Starlight Beacon then and the second Death Star, right? And therefore, kind of this thing of saying, okay, this traveling station can go anywhere and to bring peace. Again, Lena, so she's genuinely trying to do positive state building, statecraft, but it is, yeah, yeah, but it's I'm trying to train of thought here, but it sets the stage and brings the seeds of the idea of we're one unified consolidated entity. And so to have an army then, just what when 16 sorry 2022 BBY, have an army to enforce that's kind of just the last moment of it, if you will. I mean, one thing to say is that the Roman Empire only happens when the army walks through. But here the army can, if Cassio Tag had his way, the army can just fly anywhere in the galaxy whenever it wants because it has all the Star Destroyers and Thrawn. It's only because they pour all their money into the Death Star that they can't. But so
Sorry about
yeah,
that.
good.
Well, I mean, I think that's an important point to bring up, and why the Imperial Palace is the Jedi Temple.
Yeah.
Um, that I think it's always important to remember. The Republic is the Empire. Palpatine did not have to change that much.
Yeah.
He did not have to build a whole institutional organization from
Mhm.
scratch. He just became the consolidated power in the executive. It was
Mhm.
already happening for a while. The institutions were all there. It's not like Palpatine just like up the civil bureaucracy and like say, like have to build everything new from scratch. It's like,
Right.
no, just take the civil bureaucracy that's been here already for 1,000 years and just direct its energy somewhere else. Obviously, the military was a new thing he had to add, and there were
Mhm.
certainly certain new institutions he had to build up, such as
Mhm.
the ISB, which were already being built up during the Clone Wars. Comp Nor was Comp Por,
Yeah.
uh, stuff like that. A lot of the officers, important, remember, a lot of the officers like Tarkin, like
Mhm. Yeah.
Paleon and Legends and probably Canon were all
Um,
Republic officers.
the intelligence guy on the white hair guy.
Yeah, Yularen, and he was
Yeah, you
the
learn. Yeah. Yeah.
admiral in the Republic Navy.
Mhm.
Veers was a judicial. Remember in
Oh yeah.
I think that he was. I think that was an official Republic thing. Um,
I mean, it was a kid, but
yeah, still, it was like still
yeah,
working for, you know.
yeah.
So it's not, it's like if, and that's kind of the evil genius of the Palpatines. Like for a
Mhm.
lot of these guys, especially in the early years, like your transition Republic to Empire, it's like, your job didn't probably change that much.
Mhm.
Maybe now there's just a big old picture of Palpatine in your office, but outside of that, it's like, still
Mhm.
file away, yeah,
Yeah.
bunk, bunk, boring bureaucratic job.
Mhm.
Um, so
Yeah.
that's not surprising that it's like Starlight Beacon looks a little like the Death Star. It
Yeah.
all comes from the same continuity at the end of the day. There's
Mhm.
no these aren't the different things. These are the
Mhm.
same entities, really, just taking the darker path, and the monsters are in charge.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and that's kind of the question, and kind of why I'm excited for. Hi, Daisy. Um, why I'm kind of excited for the post High Republic is like,
Mhm.
how do we get from
Yeah.
High Republic to Phantom Menace? I mean, we got a little of Acolyte, so we got that. But what is the historical context? I'm a big fan of historical context in actual history discussion. Like, for example,
Mhm.
you know, a lot of people would want to talk about, I don't know, the rise of Hitler and start in 1933 when he became
Yeah.
chancellor, or 1922 when he did the beer hall putsch, maybe a little bit of 1914. I think, if my opinion is,
Yeah.
you don't start, you got to start your story maybe in 1800. I know
I've
that's
I know a story that starts in 1500s,
yeah,
like with Luther, frankly.
right. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
all historians got to start somewhere.
Yeah. True.
But you got stories that start in 1500, and
Mm.
it's a story about the Pope Francis, or I don't know,
Yeah.
or you know, uh, people want to talk about Mr. President today and all the stuff going on, and it's
Mhm.
like they want to start in 2016 when he came down the escalator, and it's like a lot of stuff going on now.
Yeah.
You could say started in the 1970s, maybe even the 1930s. Some might even say the Civil War.
Mhm.
It depends on what everyone wants to have that historical context,
Yeah.
and you know, if you want to talk about the rise of Palpatine, obviously, yes, rise and fall of the Galactic Empire can only really start in Phantom Menace because
Mhm.
that's the only stuff we have. But if Star Wars were a real place, and Chris Kempshaw, I mean Beaumont Kim, Chris Kempshaw had everything at his fingertips and
Mhm.
stuff, he might want to start his historical context with the hyperspace disaster, or with the
Yeah.
fall of Starlight Beacon. Heck, he might want to start with how did the first Sith Empire fall and transition to the rule of two, if you want to get even more,
Yeah.
into it. So I think I'm looking forward, and I want to see that historical context, and I also
Mm.
want to see what was the galaxy like that Palpatine got burst into. What
Mm.
was the galaxy like? And yes, Palpatine represents Temple. He could be just evil, all you want, but at the
Mhm.
same time, if you want to give him a little bit of depth that but doesn't undermine
Mhm.
his evil,
Yeah.
what is the world he grew up in?
Mhm.
What was Naboo like to produce?
Yeah.
What was Naboo like to produce a guy like this? It'd be like, again, it was like someone like Hitler. It's like, it's like you think, oh, he's
Yeah.
just evil, he's just a psycho little. But no, what was Austria and Germany, or
Mhm.
the German culture, German European history like
Yeah.
to produce this guy? And obviously, World War One's a big experience as well. But
Mhm.
even before then as well,
Yeah.
what was his world like? Much as we can't separate ourselves massively from what our world is like
Right.
to create our formative years. Obviously, a certain a bit of personal responsibility is always in order in terms of what we can do with it. I'm not
Mhm.
saying a bad world only produces bad people.
Right.
That's not entirely true. But the world definitely affects us. Like, I remember,
Yeah.
and I'll let you talk after this part.
Mhm.
I remember during one of my first Andor discussions with my friends, I was very much on this idea, and I still kind of am, that I think Cyril Karn trajectory in life would
Mhm.
be very different if he wasn't raised in the Empire and be doing something else. I think maybe his personality might be the same, but I think if he had
Mhm.
just been burst in the better society around him, I think he probably could have taken those talents to something maybe more productive in life.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm very curious when we get these stories of like, what was the galaxy like? What is the historical context that Palpatine grew up in to become this guy who eventually decides, hey, I'm gonna join this Darth Plagueis dude,
Mhm.
and he's gonna teach me some weird magic, and then we're
Yeah.
gonna take the political situation in the galaxy and just make it worse. You continue, but
Yeah, I mean nature and nurture, right?
Mhm.
You need to talk about Cyril Karn. I
Mhm.
think referring to a video essay that's just popped up recently about him, or maybe Dom mentioned that, and again in his Substack, hot off the press. Check it out. There. Um, uh, yeah, it's a good question in the sense of, well, yeah, I mean, like kind of what I was raising with High Republic. I do want to say though, at some point we do have to look at what are specific factors and when. And so, we don't want to go too far back, and that's another problem. We want to
Oh yeah.
say, like we don't want to go even for World War II, so we can go back to the Reformation and Luther being all, why aren't the Jews becoming Christians now? All
I
of a
mean, I go
sudden,
back to the split of the Carthaginian Empire myself.
sure. Uh, but we could go back, and that's and this idea of German identity over and against anything other outside of the German lands.
Mhm.
But I think a better answer is the like you're saying, the kind of the soil that the Third Reich developed was just the social instability of the Weimar Republic is probably the biggest cause. That's my sense of it, at least. I know that's all debated, but that, and then Hitler coming up and saying, "Yeah, I'm the answer to your question, to your frustrations and your anger." So you talk about Trump. Yeah, I mean, definitely you can go back to the Civil War, tensions that come and go. I'd want to say something like the Tea Party, like 9/11 and the Tea Party. Uh, I mean, Tea Party, to my mind, became MAGA. It just when it took over the Republican Party, and so and now the Republican Party is so thoroughly part of what Trump is that they're going to need to have a reformation of their own. Thinking about the galaxy far, far away, then I mean, yeah, I here's the thing. Maybe thinking about, so we have two stories that stand out. We have Death Plagueis by James Luceno. It's Legends. That's probably where I get this idea that corporate financial consolidation is really what the empire is birthed out. It's the conception of the empire, if you will, the gestation, the soil. And so, are we saying that's where it begins? Is it? Maybe this is the question: is it even possible to pinpoint a moment de facto, even though we can de jure, can we de facto, or is it better to say, like you're saying, what's the soil that grew out of? And yeah, Hago Damask, as James Luceno writes in this, it's a Legends novel, but what he's pulling out of the George Lucas films that are, of course, canon, um, is the power of corporate interests and the corporate levers that Darth Plagueis himself pulls on and presses. And so we don't have a canon version of that, but it's, again, it pulls out of the films and from Clone Wars, even though Clone Wars had already been done by then. So we see the corporate interests there too. We see the Kaminoans having a Senate seat, right? No, well, the Kaminoans buying a Senate seat. See the Trade Federation having a Senate seat, which is also bonkers. Um, you know, uh, Kind of like the whole senators should have, like, U.S. senators should have their corporate sponsors on their suits.
Just give
Thing.
Jeff Bezos his Senate seal. That's what's gonna. Uh,
Yes, there's that. But I think the last thing I wanted. What was the last thing I was going to say? Is oh yeah. So then the other story we have, the furthest back we've gotten after the Acolyte is Dooku Jedi Lost, right? And
I
there,
mean, Live
I
the
mean,
Jedi technically is the first we've gone.
well, after the Acolyte. So within this period,
Okay.
this 100-year period, for
Okay.
the earliest we've gotten, and and of course that's also the first mention of the phrase High Republic. But yeah, the audio drama by Kevin Scott, and what we have there, I mean, at the very least, what we have again is this Jedi Master who says, light side, whatever, I'm gonna go take my father's money, and that is, of course, his path to the dark side. That is, takes his father's money, takes again all the corporate interests, and says, we're gonna secede and gonna, use these grievances, like we talked about we talked about a number of times, these grievances that the Ozrim folks have as this pretext to create tax havens, basically. And so that's the thing, that the separatists, the Confederacy, is both a tax haven and a subsidiary resistance movement at the same time. And but ultimately, of course, it is just the ultimate corporate lever that Palpatine is pulling. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, all the corruption that, again, that's again the real soil, the context. I do like what I mean, the chapter of Rise and Fall that stands out the most to me. It's the one I've really read first, and I haven't read much of it, admittedly. That the Clone Wars, the point of the Clone Wars was to tenderize the galaxy so Palpatine could stick it on the grill. Say, just tired of conflict, tired of warfare, and also to build up this army, to build up this, to become accepting of this military running rampant throughout the galaxy, and saying, and cheering for them, saying, yeah, they're the good guys. And I know Legends goes into this more, but those Outer Rim aliens, they're the bad guys. So in people's hearts and minds, I mean, that's another where I get this whole corporate interest thing, because to all the fancy bigwigs on Coruscant, what changed between the only thing that changed between before the Clone War, before the Clone Wars and then after the Clone Wars, was just the name of the country, the name of the state. They still had all their corporations intact by and large. Now, a lot of them got nationalized over time, but they stayed rich, right? They stayed powerful. And so, I mean, Kuat drive yards, for example. You're talking about the pointy ships, right? Kuat, the and the cockpits with the grills, the round cockpits. They're fine. And that's almost the point Ryan Johnson's making, right? That continues on.
I mean, remember the episode of Mandalorian on Coruscant? There's like a bunch of rich dudes and what rich guys like, Republic, Empire. I can't keep up anymore.
Yeah, that whole thing. So,
I mean, yeah, you bring up Germany. I mean, thing is, with Germany, but that's pretty much what happens. Like a bunch of the rich elites who lived in the Empire are like, I don't know, this whole Weimar Republic thing. I'm not into it. Just get a person who's gonna kill the communists and make sure we're nice and rich, and maybe we'll get a good military in there, and fine enough. So and then that's why there's a lot of continuity between Weimar Germany and Nazi Germany.
That's interesting to bring that up, because
a lot of the same officers too, all there who still work for the Kaiser. I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
And no one wants to talk about this, but by 1930, Weimar Germany was going to become a conservative, authoritarian state eventually. It was just a matter of which faction would take over. There was either going to be a conservative, aristocratic military faction, or the Nazis, and Hitler won. So, but yeah, there's like a lot of the bureaucracy like stayed the same. A lot of the rich aristocrats were like, yeah, cool. This weird guy is gonna do all the things for us. That's great.
If you can't beat him, join him.
Yeah, pretty much.
Basically. It's interesting you bring that up, because one thing that Star Wars hasn't taken into account, because Star Wars definitely gets the whole, like I was saying, the bureaucrats and the wealthy corporate folks, they don't really experience a difference. Star Wars hasn't fully gone into the way the common folk really also rallied behind Hitler. You know, um,
Just middle
the
class people.
the middle class. And again, we're also seeing this currently, right? Uh,
Kenobi, that alien guy.
yeah, a little bit. Yeah, there's been a little bit of that, um, but yeah, not as much of they're afraid of change, afraid of uh, afraid of all these other ethnicities taking their jobs. Um,
Darn Wookiees taking the gerbs.
and uh, again, we're seeing this now that yeah, afraid of change, afraid of globalization, afraid of an erosion of identity. And so, I mean, of course, what these authoritarian leaders do is say, look, a problem, look, a solution, you know, manufacturing a problem through division. And I mean, I think, again, it does implicitly with the whole tenderizing the meat to uh, to say, okay, Palpatine's the solution, but we haven't gotten enough stories about that. I think maybe we're also due for that. Of because we've seen, oddly enough, we've seen the common folks. They're the victims and the good guys, the rebels. We haven't seen
We get a little
common
bit of that
folks.
Mask of Fear, which is nice.
Yeah, but we haven't seen enough of common folks saying "Ugh, the Jedi," which we got a little bit of that of the
Or
Jedi
more
saying,
meh, the Jedi. Meh.
yeah, but we want to say "Ugh, the Jedi." We want to
Yeah.
say Palpatine. Yeah, what a great guy. He's going to come and save us
Yeah.
from the Jedi, from this war, from our social inequality. The closest we got, actually, all the way speaking of Claudia Gray, was Lost Stars with Diana's family. Uh, that's the closest we've gotten, but it wasn't about fear and rancor. It was about just economics.
I mean,
So, yeah.
I've always said that the thing that a lot of people don't want to admit to themselves is a
Mhm.
lot of the savviest dictators, or
Mm.
not even just outright dictators, just authoritarians.
Mhm.
Um, they don't need to cheat. They can have at least 50% plus one of the majority, and that's how they
Yeah.
stay in. Like, we can always say, "Oh, Putin, he's a dictator, and he gets like 80% of the vote every year."
Mhm.
I kind of don't want to, I mean, I'm sure there's a little cheating going on. There's always going to be a little bit of that,
Yeah.
but I got to be honest. I think a lot of that's still genuine. I think it's like I don't know Russians personally,
Mhm.
but what I hear from people like, and they're like, hey, cool. This is how Russia's been for the last 1,000 years. Czar, general
Sure.
secretary, Putin, president, whatever.
Yeah.
That's how it's always been, buddy. We're fine with it. Just as long as the country's not going into chaos, like it was in the '90s, we're cool.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's like, whatever.
I
Like we're
mean,
fine with it.
that's interesting. I mean, Putin, he's consciously going back to the Russian Empire,
A
right?
little bit of that, and also it's like, it's like that. I think
Mm.
he's still genuinely a pretty popular dude. In Russia, I don't think he needs to. I don't think there's ever going to be a mass uprising because I
Mhm.
think they're okay with it.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I don't think people are. I think country's so depoliticized at the moment. It's like outside of like maybe some rich people who are like,
Mhm.
hey, idealism. It's like most common folk are like, whatever.
Russia
Uh,
needs an Alderaan, is what you're saying.
Yeah, there's no Ralderon for Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, people always talk about Viktor Orban, but like he's got a pretty good power base of just common folk. Like, sure, whatever. I don't think
Yeah.
Erdogan, same thing. But I mean you know, Palpatine and like I don't know how long Palpatine's personal popularity was pretty high, but I have to imagine it lasted probably a while. And it's like, if Mon declared the Rebel Alliance in year one of the Empire, she'd get laughed at and or probably worse shot of
Yeah.
her, or just ran out of town, right?
Well,
While Palpatine or ran
she
out of
just
the
got
galaxy.
arrested and disappeared.
That's true, right? Where like Palpatine like could just do a public rally and it's like good chunk of the people probably are genuine when they're waving
Mm.
their little imperial flag and holding their Palpatine posters.
Yeah.
Because
Uncle Sheev.
he's the beloved chancellor. And that's something a lot of high-minded people got to deal with. It's like, well,
True.
If 60% plus one votes for a dictatorship, what do you do? What do you do when a
Mhm,
majority of your population says, "Yep, we can
mhm,
repress these people"?
mhm,
I read a good article about this, like who decides what democracy is, and
mm.
you realize democracy is like one of the most opaque words ever. It goes into it's by Adam Przegroski.
All right.
Uh, it says stuff like democracy is a system in which citizens collectively decide by whom, to, and to what extent how they will be governed. This feature is definitional. A regime is democratic if and only if people are free to choose, including remove governments. It goes into a bunch of other stuff too, and like the minimalist versus the maximalist definitions of
Mhm.
democracy. How these days everyone's democratic, which is true. And what I mean by everyone's democratic, there is no country outside of Saudi Arabia who says we're not a democracy. Again,
Yeah.
go back to Putin. Putin's not saying
True.
we're not a democracy. Putin's like, no, we're a federal republic. We like the United States. We got a president, we got a legislature, we got courts, we got states. We have elections every damn 7 years. No one actively says
Yes.
anymore we are not a democratic country. You
The
know,
Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
I
Which one
mean,
is that?
technically, they are very happy to say we're still a Marxist-Leninist state. They're one of the few people who actually still say that. Actually, no, they say
But they're
the.
called the Democrat. I mean, I don't know what the
I,
Korean term is, but the
I
official
mean,
term is the
that's true.
Democratic
Yeah.
People's Republic of Korea.
Yeah. What country actively says we're not democratic anymore? That sort of has gone the way of the dodo.
Yeah.
So
It's marketing.
marketing, but it's also weirdly kind of true. Turkey has elections, and they like winning their elect. Erdogan likes winning his
Erdogan, yeah.
elections as much as he can, as genuinely as he can. He doesn't do the whole "I get 99% of the vote, my opposition gets zero." Like he wins by, if not high, it's like 60%, then at least 55.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, sure, but I mean, how much has he kind of stacked the deck?
Oh
And
yeah,
how
he
much has
stacks
Putin
he
stacked the deck?
stacks the
Yeah.
deck and puts the pressure on the thumb, but he
Yeah.
tries to make sure at least a good 40% is probably genuine as possible.
Yeah.
Uh,
I can see that. I mean,
so-
think about voter registration in, let's see what happens in the with the next 2028. See how that shakes out, or even
yeah.
the 2026 midterms.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
here's the question. We'll get into this next, the third part of our little
Hmm.
discussion.
Yeah.
Are republics democracies? I remember a conservative pundit once said, "Oh,
Yeah.
America's not a democracy; we're a republic." I don't know. That is true to a certain
Mm,
extent. We were modeled off the Romans for a reason. We are a
mm,
republic. Are republics democracies? Half the world is a republic.
mhm.
There are no apps. You either have full-on republics or constitutional monarchies, or just full-on monarchies like Saudi Arabia or Oman.
Well, they're also parliamentary republics.
I count those as just republics. Not everybody, as long as if you don't have a royal family as your head of state, then you're a republic.
Sure,
So
which we can get into what the distinction is, but yeah,
some of the parliamentary republic can be authoritarian too.
yeah.
But point is, are republics democracies?
Hmm.
That is the question. And that is the question. And also, you know, to add this a little bit extra, the real world has shown you don't need an emperor to be an empire. The when with the Roman Empire truly a thing, they were spreading their borders for years under the Republic.
Hmm.
Um, America has been an empire for years. We had actual colonies in the 1900s. That was the Spanish American War. We took Cuba. We took the Philippines.
Hmm.
Philippines was an actual U.S. colony
Yeah,
for a couple decades.
and still Guam, American Samoa.
Yep, we still got Guam, Puerto
Yeah,
Rico, if you want to, for those people out there.
yeah. Washington
Um,
D.C. No wait.
Eh, France was making its colonies under Napoleon when he was emperor, but it kept those
Yeah.
colonies when it became a republic and had
Hmm.
a large colonial empire in Africa for several
Hmm.
years until the 60s. And then still got some places in Guyana and just little islands. So it's like, people have said France was the empire without an emperor. Um, so,
Yeah.
there's another question about when does the Galactic Republic become an empire? you know, it. I mean, even in the High Republic, they're colonizing.
Yeah.
I remember even Tarkin book brings this in. It's like in a more cynical light of like, oh yeah, they're making deals with the local natives, or just you know, dealing with that, or just
Hmm.
expanding to get more natural resources. I mean, that is imperialist, even if you have
Yeah.
good intentions and high-minded people in power. That's still very you're expanding your borders to these other worlds and sending people out there. I mean,
Hmm.
you know, I always like to joke about this, but one thing about Star Trek and Deep Space Nine is Deep Space Nine kind of outright just says the Federation is just another one of these empires in the Alpha Quadrant, along with the Klingons and the Romulans and the Cardassians. That's kind of even like the Section 31 episodes
Hmm.
near the end, where it's
Yeah.
like Section 31 is just prepping for the next war. Cause at the end of the Dominion War, it's going to be the Romulans and the Federations as the two most powerful forces in the Alpha Quadrant. Because Klingons are going to be pretty weak. Cardassian is going to be gone, and so it's
Let
just
the record show I was not the one to bring up Star Trek this week.
I mean, yeah, it's again
Yeah.
Federation is not technically imperial monarchy. It's a
No.
republic. It has a rotating president. I mean, I don't know much about the Federation's government, but there's no lineage there.
No,
But
it's identical to the American system. I
you
mean,
know,
yeah. So I'm well. So I mean, that's the thing. These loose definitions of what's a democracy, what's a republic.
what's an
I mean,
empire?
yeah, like the bare bones definition of a republic is like saying one without a hereditary monarchy, a thing of the people. If you look at the etymology, uh, republic is the Latin term for effectively sort of what democracy is in Greek. Right? Democracy means ruled by the people. The republic means a thing of the people or a public thing. And so, um, I mean, it took on the notion of checks and balances. It took on the notion of a written constitution. Um, yeah, it took on this notion of this grandeur of this people coming together from the many one. Uh, one from the many, and this American ideal. That's where this Enlightenment ideal of will come together in Congress assembled, and uh, have reasonable debate and rational debate, and then pass a bill, and then have a reasonable debate with the president who will sign the bill, and he's not the king, but he's also, but he's not directly elected either until we did get you guys did start having direct elections.
We technically actually don't directly elect the president. We still have the electoral
Yeah, it's
college.
still the electoral college, but when voting for the electoral college makeup now, right? Um, I do think it is interesting. So I guess the question then is: a republic can be democratic, adjective, um, but it doesn't have to be. A constitutional monarchy is more likely to be democratic because our head of state is some chap across the ocean who has no actual power now. You know, um, that's of course the way, but that's the thing is a republic is a matter of constitutions and institutions. Democracy is a matter of norms and of what those institutions have built into them and the checks that they have on them. I mean, there's the thing, checks, right? Um, but a federal constitutional monarchy like Canada has the checks of the provinces. That's been the big issue. I mentioned Quebec before, and uh, that again the disputes between provinces and federal government have been adjudicated by the Supreme Court. So there are these checks and balances. It's just that the biggest check, oddly enough, is that the executive has this internal check by being the leaders of the legislature. And so, ideally, that reasonable debate can happen in parliament. It can happen in the governing caucus. But a government can run roughshod over everything and everyone if they want to. That's the thing. So a parliamentary democracy, a parliamentary government doesn't have to be democratic either. Again, it just developed since the Magna Carta in tandem with these norms, and so it's slippery, it's messy, but that's the thing is, a republic, it's too neat and too clean, I think, and that's why it's so susceptible to abuse, is because it just to the letter of the law. A very litigious society in the U.S. is an incredibly litigious society. I think the late republic became a very litigious society, right? How that the Naboo trying to settle their claim through the courts, then how many people would die, right? It would just take too long, everything being tied up. So, that's again maybe another part of the birth of the empire and the soil of the empire, isn't how litigious it became, in a way that Palpatine was able to take advantage of. Here's the odd thing, though, is the way he takes advantage of it, and the way a certain president has taken advantage of things, is a brilliant line. Like the key line in the film The Apprentice, which brilliant film. Roy Cohn says to his apprentice, "We aren't a nation of laws; we're a nation of men. Don't play the laws, play the man." And threatening, blackmailing a judge's family in order to get a favorable ruling, that kind of thing. I think Palpatine was able to do that as well, and because if the law is taken to be kind of this container, this lid, then it doesn't matter what's inside the container. This is the proceduralism problem, right? And maybe this is also the democracy stops at elections problem, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what's in the container, as long as the container is intact, then what's going to happen is the most powerful person in the container is going to keep on banging against the container wall until it cracks, because they just want to get out and do what they want. Whereas if we flip it the other way around, we say, this is again the pluralist argument a little bit, but if a state institutions are embedded within a set of norms of human rights and human dignity, and the dignity of I'm talking about environmental rights and the interconnectedness of those, right? Then we'll have containers that serve those norms, and so again, that's the ideal. Mm-hmm. But the containers that serve the people in those institutions are, again, the role of government, right? Is it to burst the container so people can make as much money as they want? Is it to say, okay, let's actually not see it as a container, see it as the scaffolding, that the building is coming around it, and then maybe we can amend the scaffolding if we need to. It's hard to, because that's the shape of the building, but let's also respect the importance of the scaffolding. So that's maybe the thing, is that Palpatine was able to burst the container, gradually erode the container, and made a new container. And so Mon Mothma is left to pick up the pieces and say, okay, everyone, let's actually build a scaffolding instead.
Well, this brings me up to that article I found, which, mm-hmm. by full disclosure, I found it by accident. I just found it today. So, which mm-hmm. Gets up into this kind of point, which I'll just want to read because I think it's actually really interesting. Mm-hmm. Begins with who decides what democracy is. The rise of extreme rightist parties is not anti-democratic. The fear of extreme right is justifiably fed by the worry that these parties might try to undermine democracy. It's so long as these parties refrain from trying to undermine the possibility of their being removed from office, and so long as they observe the institutional rules that control policymaking, their
Mhm.
participation in government is not anti-democratic. The
Yeah.
emergence of political magicians is also not anti-democratic. It just shows that when people become fed up with established alternatives, they are willing to take risk of embracing untired solutions. When I studied
Untried
elections
things.
that led to major shifts of policy paradigms, the ascension of the Social Democrats in Sweden in 1932, or the neoliberalism of the US and UK in 1979 and 1980, respectively, I assumed that voters would only support a party proposing something unprecedented if this party could claim a record of responsibility, meaning that if they had been in office before and had acted like all other parties while holding office. If the victories of Trump, Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro, Argentina's Milei show that when people are desperate, they're willing to seek any remedies and
Mm.
grasp at straws, even if those offered by charlatans who sell miracle cures. As Rio de Janeiro Uber driver told me in an interview, you see the decay, this moral crisis, these politicians who steal and don't do anything for us. I'm looking at voting for somebody completely new. When people have
Mhm.
nothing to lose, they embrace all kinds of delusions, like when diseased by applying cottage cheese or making gold from base metals in Weimar Germany. Trump's Make America Great Again campaign slogan was no more than so was Bolsonaro's clean government jobs and guns. So was Milei's Viva la Libertad Carajo. So was expelling immigrants, the battle cry of Europe's far right parties. That is what we do not anticipate when we believe their victories unthinkable. In
Mm.
sum, then, the rejection of representative institutions does not present a conundrum. We cannot pretend that these institutions are functioning well, but the solutions are not obvious and some are dangerous to democracy. In turn, neither the proliferation of parties, nor the rise of extreme right, nor the emergence of magicians constitutes a certain democracy in the minimalist sense, always with the same caveat that these democracies stay away from backsliding.
Hmm.
I'm sure it makes more sense in the grander article, but yeah.
Yeah, but again, it's kind of what I was getting at with the fear and the distrust.
Mhm,
I mean, and it points to a deeper kind of distrust of just the status quo. And so, I mean, that's the wild thing is what they need is what they're distrustful of, what they're frustrated by, and actually being weighed down by
mhm,
is this top-down corporate control.
mhm,
But what they're being told they should be angry about and frustrated by is just the rate of change and DEI initiatives and immigration, right? And said, and it's easier to blame people who you know who well to blame change and to blame because change is uncomfortable and sharing the load is uncomfortable and sharing the table is uncomfortable or remaking so yeah, blaming to share of the table. They're saying the problem is to maintain the table when what they really need is a new table where everybody can come together and support. When everyone comes together, we all win. But yeah, I mean, with the Alliance to Restore the Republic, hopefully the new Republic, and this is the question I brought up from Red's question at the beginning. I'd like to see the new Republic try to make a new table. I mean, that's the thing with the Federation. Ultimately, that's the ideal, is that they do make a new table. Um, that was Gene Roddenberry's Utopia. I don't think the New Republic is going to be utopia, but it's interesting for to see Mon Mothma and Leia and them do their best with what they have, because that is all we can do now in the here and now. You know.
Well, that goes back to
Yeah.
Star Wars for a hot second. I
Yeah.
actually had this thought as I was kind of reading the rest of the article.
Mhm.
I wonder if maybe I don't know if Trial of the Jedi will have time to go into this, or maybe this is
Mhm.
more of the story afterwards.
Mhm.
If one of the big kind of post Nihil thoughts is, oh shoot, we got to really think about what to do with the
Mhm.
Outer Rim now.
Yeah.
Let's charter these companies to help us out. And what starts out is like, hey, these companies can help us out. I'm
Mhm.
sure that won't go wrong. It's like they start getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And then the Trade Federation, and then the Commerce Guild. God, I don't even know if the Trade Federation is even around in High Republic, and they never say anything about them. So it's like,
There was
are the
that
same?
video game, but no, they aren't really.
Doesn't seem like it. I don't even like. Is the banking clan even a thing at this point? Like, are the I mean, I guess Mutulus is the planet, but are they banking clanning?
I don't think
At this
they
point,
pick.
like when was that formed?
Mhm,
Like when are are we? I would not be shocked if
mhm.
one of the if the things of the High Republic is the first seeds of what will become the mega corporations
Yeah.
start to really and may start to form and take their 100 years of consolidation or
Mhm.
maybe more
True.
uh
Yeah.
begin with this. I mean, an acolyte trade federation's around and they're
True.
probably not
Yeah.
mega big, but it does seem like they're already starting to cut corners and
Mhm.
cheat off the side.
Yeah. Skim off the side. Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. I mean, again, to my point about economic consolidation here. Yeah. I mean, it's a little. That's interesting. I hadn't fully thought of that because you know these corporations and these guilds, um, shipping guilds and whatnot. They seem benign. They're helping the Jedi. They're helping the Republic. And yeah, they're going to help the Republic. The Hudson's Bay Company and the East India Tea Company were probably considered incredibly benign, except not the indigenous people, not the people in India, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, oddly enough, Hudson's Bay, it's a department store now. But um, initially it was the fur traders along the they're protected by the forts, by the army. That's part of the part of Canada's story. Um, I mean, also the churches and missionaries and that being part of the residential schools and that story as well. Jedi outposts don't seem to be having that kind of effect, but maybe they will. That'll be wild to see if they kind of. I don't know. Maybe Jedi seem to be more mundane. I definitely like that idea. Not like it as in what a great thing to happen to the galaxy, but like that.
Woo! Massey supports mega corporations.
I
No gun race
support
here.
the very interesting way that Team Luminous has seeded that in, and including there's a reference in Into the Light to something that will become a pretty prominent corporation, at least in another novel. I won't give anything else away, but Joel, you'll know when you hear it. You'll know when you hear it.
I mean,
Yeah,
reason why the Trade Federation had the droid army in the first place,
yeah,
that's one of those things that never really gets explained in the movie. The reason they have this big droid army and it's legal is because they're supposed to be protecting themselves from pirate attacks.
yeah.
That's the whole point. The Trade Federation's like, hey, we'll help you with your trade. We're gonna get
Mhm.
these planted. We'll deliver the cargo and stuff. And it's like we have these big guns thing because we don't want pirates to attack us. This
Pirates
is
like the Nile.
tires like the Nile. Like Hondo.
Hmm.
that's the reason
Yeah.
why they have these little corporations have these mini armies. Like
Hmm.
this. They know about this. This is sanctioned to some
Yeah.
extent. Um,
But pirates again, the Nile threat. It's just been dealt with,
mhm.
but something just like it might pop up.
We'll be
We got to
ready
be
this
able to
time.
defend ourselves. Yeah,
Yeah.
they'll be ready this time.
And
So
I do think that both in the real world, but also I mean, both in the real world and
yeah.
in Star Wars, I do think that, especially what I think, which I think we always say this, and I think this goes back to the New Hope novelization.
Hmm. Hmm.
Palpatine's consolidation of power is through the mega
Hmm.
corporations. The consolidation of the mega corporations is very much the consolidation of the empire
Hmm.
in many ways.
That's what I was getting at.
And I think if you want to look, I think if we are to look at like when when this so here's my hypothesis, and I could be wrong. Maybe the story will go differently.
Hmm.
If I'm one of these podcasters who I love, who give like the longest, like this 5 hour podcast about this period from like the 30s, but we have to start in like 1800
Hmm.
to truly understand it. Which there is a podcast I have done that, and they start in the 1800s
I believe that.
to
Yeah.
describe something that technically starts in 1922. Um, good stuff.
Hmm.
If I were one of these guys and I was doing the Empire,
Hmm.
obviously, I think I would definitely track the birth of the mega corporations. Maybe I would
Hmm.
start maybe a little bit. Maybe I'd have like a little bit of a slide or paragraph of like, let's also maybe get into just the downfall of the first republics and the Sith Empire. 'Cause
Mhm.
that's a part of the fantasy part of it. You got to get into that. But what I would do is I would track when do a lot of the mega corporations that we all know and love
Mhm.
are founded, or when are officially chartered, or officially kind of given their status.
Mhm.
And I would ask, okay, why? Then I would say, okay, I would probably have to first look at the High Republic era, see the context
Mhm.
of why did the Republic make these economic choices to begin to create the banking clan, the trade federation, and all that. I mean, I don't know if all the corporations. I mean, I don't know if the banking clan could still exist by
Techno
now.
Union. Don't forget the Techno
Techno Techno
Union.
Union. I guess the Huts are still around, but the Huts are always seem to be around.
Yeah.
Um, Although here again, if you
Mhm.
kind of look at the corporation side of thing, this is the first time the Huts and the Republic kind of team up,
Yeah.
which is awesome. And they'll team up again in the Clone Wars, and then the Empire and the Huts will kind of give the Huts, the you are our favorite crime organization, Hut, so you'll get a lot of the special treatment of just keep crime in check and don't mess with us.
Favored crime organization.
You're
Yeah.
Jabba, you're the overlord of crime now. The Emperor commands it. Jabba and Vader got their deal. So again,
They
starts with
did.
the High Republic,
Vader steps into the palace and says, "Let's make a deal." Sorry,
pretty
keep going.
much.
Yeah.
I look at the High Republic, kind of see like, okay, a lot of the seeds begin here, and then the mega corporations, and then we
Mhm.
would track kind of the rise of the mega corporations, and then things
Mhm.
start to really come to a head in Phantom Menace, and then Attack of the Clones, and here we are. So
Mhm.
I think that's very. If I were to look for my historical
Yeah.
context, that's yeah. I think then the High Republic is our a turning point, where the
Mhm.
chaos of the Nile happens. Woohoo! We probably are going to win, and I'm
Mhm.
sure it's going to be displayed as a great victory. We did it. But then when we kind of get into the aftermath, that's when the Republic starts saying maybe we should deregulate our economies and let these corporations maybe patrol the outer rim a bit more to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah. So what
And
you're saying is you finally agree the High Republic is the beginning of the end.
I mean, I think I've always agreed with that. I just
All right.
think that it was. I don't think. I think it is. I don't actually know. I think it's the end of the beginning. To quote Winston Churchill. Um, 'Cause I think
For what? For the New Republic or for
for the High Republic, for the
well,
Republic, the end of the beginning. I think that is. I don't. I think it's definitely an inflection point.
mhm.
I think that things won't be that bad still, and that the
No, it's not
decay
gonna
and
be fully
decline
good.
will still be very, very long and stoppable
Yeah.
for many more centuries. It's only until you
Well,
get to episode 1 where it's like, "Oh, shoot, maybe we can't go back."
yeah. Oh, that's yeah, where the point of no return is.
Right. Although
Yeah.
some might say the point of no return might be Attack of the Clones. Although even George, I feel like
Mhm.
I do wonder if what George would say the point of no return would be, because I have heard people make arguments on his behalf. He thinks the point of no return is until the bitter end. I think there's always a chance to go back until the declaration of empire. Um,
I mean, Mom Mothma tries to this novel. She basically tries to go back to a republic by having the emperor just be a figurehead and having the elected senate, mostly elected senate,
I
have all the power. It's true, and
mean, I
it
think
passes, and then Palpatine vetoes it. But
that's true.
yeah,
The point of no return debate is always another one where
hmm
people are going to debate forever. It's like it was here, it was there, and some people are like, no, it's only you point of no return till the last minute.
yeah,
I guess it's how cynical you are as a person, I guess.
true,
So or deterministic you are
yeah,
of your history.
hmm
But
yeah,
let me look at my notes because I think that's real. That's really it. I mean, the next part is
hmm
something I already talked about is the
yeah,
con is what Palpatine's world was like, and
yeah. Just
I
context.
I do want to know what Naboo was like. Cause like again, we always
hmm
talk about Naboo as this great shiny planet of
hmm
joy and Gungans and pretty, but it produced Palpatine.
I
It
mean,
produced
there's so good.
and unless you want to just say, oh, Palpatine was always evil, which I mean, to some extent, there probably
hmm
is a little bit of that.
Yeah,
What it produced still a pretty nasty kid.
Yeah.
What kind of society does that say about Naboo, where someone like a Palpatine can come out of it, right?
It produced both Palpatine and Padme, right?
Yeah, that's what we
I
said.
mean, so therefore it produced Palpatine and Luke and Leia and Rey. Ultimately, you want to. I mean, Tatooine also produced them all, but um, yeah, it's interesting. And there's a reason. There's got to be a reason why the Sentekas start off on Naboo,
Mhm.
why the Nile rough it up, why it's one of the. It's going to be one of the well, I guess sort of. It's more of a distraction in High Republic in Phase 3, but um, yeah, well at least there's a bit of a focus there. What's happening there? Um, so yeah, why Naboo?
Let's see the dark side. Well, I mean, we kind of see a little bit in Plagueis the dark side Naboo. I
Yeah,
mean, they don't like the Gungans,
and
so
King. Yeah, that's true. King Varuna. We need a King Varuna. That'd be interesting. Like something like that. Be fascinating. So there's good
yeah.
Daisy.
But
Yeah.
I think that's it. I don't know if we've answered any of our initial questions,
Well,
but I
basically the answer is that it's kind of messy, right?
she's missing.
Yeah. Um, yeah. We got to go too. It's been fun. I agree. Good job, Daisy. Yes, and that is a good time to wrap things up. Thanks everyone for joining, chiming in the comments, announcing your arrival. Please do that. We'll get to that.
One more
And
question. One more
yeah,
tiny question.
go for it.
A question for you, Matthew.
Mm.
Do you think Trial of the Jedi anywhere in the book
Mhm.
will show us the legislation or the official creation of the Trade Federation?
I don't think Charles wants to be that on the nose. But I think he'll do something that in his mind is intended to say this is where this is going. So I do think maybe something about, like you're saying, some sort of regulation of these outer rim entities.
Mhm.
And then we'll know, okay, if you know, okay. But I don't think it's gonna be called the Trade Federation. I don't think it's gonna be called that. It's gonna be called like something that becomes the Trade Federation.
The
So
Nemoidian Committee to oversee the Outer Rim.
I think Nemoidians will be involved.
Mhm.
Is that makes sense now that you're talking about this, right?
Mhm.
I can see that happening. So there you go, fun times. But yeah, that's a good place to end it. I'm pleasantly surprised we talked a lot about High Republic in this because High Republic is what creates the soil that ultimately leads to the fall of the Republic, the late Republic, and the rise of the Empire. Turns the soil unwittingly, because Lena So did not intend that at all. She'd be horrified by what her successor does.
Mhm.
But that is a good point to wrap things up tonight. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us in the comments. Please do let us know what you thought of our conversation, what you thought of a response to Red's comments. What do you think of Into the Light if you're reading it? Tells the Underworld, Revenge of the Sith novelization, and of course the whole question of when does the Republic become the Empire, and how does democracy give itself away in that way? Please do comment below in the comment boxes, etc. Also, please do give this video a like and a share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Joel, another great poli sci discussion. It's like we have poli sci degrees here or something.
I know, right?
There we go. We both do. There we go. Where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at JID20234 on Blue Sky, JID20234 on Blue Sky. And I am primarily, though, always on Star Wars Underworld Discord, where again, this Friday, we're watching Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
There you go. Yeah, please do check that out. A fun night, and yeah, Rogue One, great film. You can follow me personal Instagram threads and Blue Sky NEUG1138. Still on the Bird app at NEUG485. Unfortunately, the Elon app, but still the Bird app. Why not? And of course, we are at Ion Canon on Blue Sky and Ion Canon Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Of course, Tractor Beam, no Tractor Beam this coming week, but give me great Tractor Beam in the next week and a half. a week from tonight. Uh, in this next week in church calendar is Holy Week, which is of course the week before Easter. The Jesus in Jerusalem on the way to the crucifixion and then the resurrection. So we're talking about the chosen one. We're going to have very much a theology time about the chosen one, and in Star Wars, and in some real world beliefs as well. Hopefully, see that in, so that'll be good. Holy Week, Easter episode, and then
He's risen and become a Force
there
ghost.
we go. Another good one, Force Ghosts, another time. Do that in a few weeks. There we go. So also to note, we have basically come around to saying with Andor, it's going to be 3 episodes to talk about each week. So we're going to also devote our whole episode to the Andor episodes. It's going to give us plenty to talk about, I'm sure. So stay tuned for all that. Of course, also we'll mention on Tractor Beam, we'll mention Andor episodes, but of course still other Star Wars comics to talk about. And then of course check out the flagship on Thursday nights. They will definitely be focusing on the Andor episodes as well. And of course also for your celebration news, keep it locked across the network, the different things we're focusing on and checking out. So please do keep an eye on us and an eye on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for everything coming up in Star Wars in the next few weeks and a bit. So we're pleased that you will join us again next week, talking about the chosen one here on the Iron Canon podcast. Until then, let's build this thing and head home.